This is a team that started out with 4 people, had one person from bioethics class leave, really drop out of the class and leave the team. Another person had to leave for medical reasons, like at a point, juncture that they were right in the middle of stuff, in fact, out testing the actual activity they were doing. Since then, recently we've added in Marisha, a fellow who has been in the studio before to help, but not till very recently. So they, my suggestion is that we don't expect them to have a complete product, that they were some time ago slowed down, so they still continue to work as a 2-person team for quite a while, and then most was a 3-person team.
And I have to apologize because for work reasons I need to look at email or run out at some point. I probably have to leave before the end, so it has nothing to do with the presentation, and I didn't want to miss it, and I will be here for hopefully a full 45 minutes, but it's not about it.
Yeah, and so I would suggest filling in the blanks with your imagination before we're done with critique.
Right. Okay. So, hi everyone. We're Serendipity. We actually were, as Arden said, we went through a huge emotional roller coaster. We started with cultural diversity and inclusivity in general because that's kind of a shared passion of ours, and we wanted to really be able to instill some sort of, we wanted to prevent discrimination among DC elementary school kids. But we realized how unrealistic that goal might have been, given that there are programs out there that try to do that. And through an informational interview that I had with an Ask tutor, which is Ask is a program under the Center for Social Justice Research, and it's where they send Georgetown students to the DC schools in order to mentor these kids who may be in a less ideal situation than the rest of us. And the problems that she highlighted were the lack of civic engagement. The kids didn't really feel like they could make a difference in society. They didn't really think that it was useful to vote, do community service, those kind of things. And then the second was there existed tensions between local neighborhoods. So it wasn't a race issue because they were all primarily African American, but it was more of a neighborhood issue where neighboring blocks may have some kind of tension. So in light of that, we wanted to kind of broaden our scope from cultural diversity to empathy, because I think empathy is the core quality that you need in order to resolve discrimination, in order to foster cultural diversity. So that's kind of our introduction there. Our initial idea was to create an incubator or a resource for the DC tutors. And so we have the empathy building activities for children, and we started off with the gloves and shoes activity that we already prototyped and everything at Spring Fling. And Dan, you can.
We prototyped it 3 times. One of our group members who dropped the course, she prototyped it the first time. She said it went well. We prototyped it in our rhetoric class and national policy class, and all 3 times it went.
Explaining it a little bit. Yeah, sorry, I just realized not all of you guys.
No, it is. So pretty much, Gloves and Shoes is a game that we came up with based on the concepts of in-group and out-group bias. In-group bias being you tend to like your own group better, and because of that you sort of just psychologically are less inclined to like groups or people that are not in your own group, so out-group bias. So what we tried to do was, I don't know, have you guys ever seen the experiment called A Class Divided? It was filmed years ago, where there was a teacher and she was teaching a class of second or third grade kids, and she said, okay, so for today, blue-eyed kids, you guys are better than brown-eyed kids. And brown-eyed kids, you're going to wear this thing that's going to let us identify from a distance if you're brown-eyed or blue eyes. Blue eyes get extra recess. Blue eyes get to drink from this water fountain. Brown eyes, you have to go outside the classroom to drink from the class water fountain. And pretty much, and these kids that were just friends became to resent each other just because one was blue-eyed and the other was brown-eyed. So what we tried to do is create that sort of environment where, something that's really, really simple, where we would split 2 groups up. One would take off their shoes and put plastic gloves on their feet, and then another group would put shoes on their hands, and then they would sort of like we would put them in a group, and we'd ask 2 questions: why is your group better, and what was the other one? Why is your team not as good? And then we had this like plus or minus sheet where it's like where you have pluses and then we have us them. So it's like a 4 square, if you guys can sort of picture it. And then like we would have 2 scribes, as in I would be part of the gloves group, she'd be part of the shoes group, and then we would listen to their answers, and we would sort of organize everything based on that little document. And then we would be able to go through it, look at what they've said, sort of debrief, and then come together and ask them questions. And then sort of transition to us explaining exactly what the purpose of the activity was, in simple terms, especially these kids, especially because they're kids. So is that yeah, good?
Sure.
Gloves and shoes? That's gloves and shoes.
And what Dan and I realized is that it might not be like impressive enough to just say that we were working only on this throughout the whole semester, though it did take a lot of time to get the wording right and of course design like all the sheets and the pamphlets that we wanted to distribute. But we wanted to actually make a website that has just more than this, has activities like this, maybe not as complex, but even something that we wanted to keep in mind is that we wanted our activities to be accessible, especially because we're targeting a group of people who may not have the resources to like buy board games. And we started out with wanting to make a board game, but we wanted to do something that was electronic so they can just print it out and all they need is paper and a few like things that are around the house. So keeping that in mind, we made like a bunch of different activities grounded on research that we have done. We have like a bunch of references that we went through. But presenting this.
Do you want to show them the game, like the 2 that we have?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
So coming into this week, we had made 3 games, one of them being gloves and shoes. This was another game we had made. We called it Your Rule Book. We had someone draw these little drawings out. Pretty much first page. This is first page of 3. You have 5. Like pretty much this game was designed with the premise that there are sort of rules that are very important to live by. There are rules that promote empathy. There are rules that just have that allow someone to function in society and allow them to be a good person. But some people, some students maybe, or some elementary school students might not know exactly these rules or really be aware of what they need to do to be a good person, a good empathetic person. So what we tried to do is we came up with 5 sayings. We came up with 1 drawing for each of them of a drawing that would describe that saying.
Right, and then at the end it'd be more of a do-it-yourself type of thing where the instructions are like cut out each picture from page 1 and color them if you want, tape or glue each picture on the boxes below and write the rule you think applies to the pictures on the lines. And then it says leave the last 2 boxes blank, and we wanted that in order to be a creative opportunity for the kids to write their own rules that they live by that have to do with obviously empathy and the whole notion of golden rules.
Yeah. And then they would cut it out, like they cut out the 8 boxes and then they'd staple it together and then they'd have like a physical rule book. And then so that's rule book.
Yeah, and this came out of the notion that we wanted the kids to have something tangible, something that they can look back upon, or something that proves that, oh, this day happened and we had, because the thing with the gloves and shoes is that happens and you have a debrief and the kids like go about their day and they're done with, they don't even remember they had that empathy building activity. So we wanted something that was, mobile, that was able to be, that had some type of personality. Like the user was allowed to like implement their own personality into this book by coloring it, by writing their own rules. So that was kind of the idea behind this. And yeah, all these drawings are original, so it's no copyright problem involved. And then this one also came from research. We realized that storytelling is a huge aspect of empathy, being able to listen to other people's experiences and being able to integrate yourself into that person's experience is also important. So we have this handout called What Would You Do? Dan created the scenario, so I'll let him take it away.
Yeah, so pretty much what would you do? I designed just sort of thinking that like when you're in a certain situation, you sometimes it's sometimes difficult for someone to know how to act, when to act, or even if they should be acting at all. So what I did was I wrote out five scenarios. I think like one of them is an old lady is having trouble with her grocery bags. Another one is some girl sitting alone at lunch and she looks very sad. And then you ask the question, what would you do? And then you sort of engage in a class discussion of what would you do. And then earlier this week, actually, I think this was a couple days ago, Risha actually came up with the good idea of asking also, how do you, what might the,
what might that person be feeling?
Yeah, what might that person be feeling? So that way, because I didn't think about it until a couple days ago, but maybe the girl who's sitting alone at lunch doesn't necessarily want someone to sit with her. Maybe she's having a rough day, but part of empathy is being able to perceive both sides. And I think what we had initially done was only design one side of it. So we kept the same situations. I don't know where the other document is. It's somewhere. But you just ask a different question, like how is the other person feeling?
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to use those two as a complement in one activity.
Yeah. And then lastly, I guess we presented this, in the design lab yesterday, and Arjun was saying that it might be a bit amateur because other people there are professionals who are, sorry, I'm hitting you on the spot. Sorry.
You want me to give it?
Oh no.
This is turned into instructional design for K-12.
Yeah, so keeping that concern in mind, I guess we created something else that might actually be better than this, so I really thank Arjun for bringing that up. But keep in mind that we only heard that criticism yesterday, so it was kind of stressful for us because it was the day before the crit and we had to come up with something.
And just to add, just one more thing about what we were intending to do with that other project. We were intending after this to increase the volume of games that we have. Not just we weren't just going to have 3 games. We were intending to spend a large chunk of time just coming up with quick games. We weren't going to be able to design these super long games because then we wouldn't have a real resource. So what we want to do is just create a huge volume. I don't know if you guys think that's a good idea. We have this other idea that we could go with. But yeah, so I guess
so I guess I'll just just pass those around. I'm sorry, these are really bad.
They should do it.
Oh, they should do it. Okay. Just give up.
Do you want one of them?
So we only have to give up those because these are for the connected.
Okay.
Basically, this is just a little, I like calling it foldable, but Marisha thinks it's lame.
I didn't say lame
a foldable,
Just
because it's foldable. But anyway, it's a folding book. And basically what we had in mind is, of course,
would you like them to do it first?
Oh, yeah,
If you want
sure.
to use this to prototype it, as you said, let them fill it out and then
Kelly, give her time.
Wait, what? Do now?
You can be.
you can explain instructions.
Yeah, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Fill it out with you can fill it out with 2 people.
Fill it out with a buddy. It's basically the whole notion is you're creating your own nation. Your own entity, your own country, yeah.
City, town.
So name it whatever you want, and then I think the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory.
This is supposed to be a little insignia. This is an insignia.
Like a coat of arms.
So coat of arms. So
Yeah,
you draw your own
coat
coat
of
of arms. This is a medal where it's you're the best at something, or or just something about a medal.
Do you have another one?
Yeah, we have one more.
Yeah, but this is supposed to be I guess we can show it with just one.
That's fine.
Wait, we need this.
Oh, you need another one.
No, because we need.
It's not too bad. Unless somebody goes first.
Yeah.
Well, save
I'm gonna
one.
just give one more. Yeah,
Save
save
one.
one.
You just roll for those two.
I mean, yeah, but this one needs a brand new one. 'Cause that's
Right.
the
Just
worst
save
one.
one.
Well,
Yeah, that one.
because it's 2 of them.
Yeah,
So you
that's
have
what
one
I'm
of these or 2 of
Yeah,
these?
2 of them.
Okay, so that's
Somebody
two.
needs it.
We only gave out 3 to them.
So what are they?
Oh, I get it.
We're a short one.
Yeah.
There's that one that's over there that it's rough that I sketched out.
Yeah. There's one.
Yeah. But it doesn't, can you write sort of 3 basic freedoms or
Chris,
whatever?
you want to do this one? Because we need, actually, you guys, they need,
Yeah, we need even numbers.
That's fine. Sure.
No, we just need 2 of these.
that's a early prototype.
We don't need that. No, no, we're good. Yeah. That's, so it's not, this is like just a.
Right.
You should go to this.
Maybe shoes on top of that.
Yeah, go do it. She's creative. And
So we could do that. Anyone?
Jake's thinking really hard about
Jake's
this
doing it.
information.
Real town in here. Alright, so this is,
We are, yeah.
Wow.
Because you start with the right sergeant.
Okay.
Alright, whatever.
Soccer Nation building starts
Follow
with
the
the
instructions.
responsibilities.
Go in
She
order.
did a righteous bill.
we do an open door. That's many universities do that. They do an open door. We're better at drawing. House with an open door that has tools on a table. Like,
That's maybe a higher
World champs.
Chicken.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, made me laugh a lot.
What goes in the last bit?
That's like a medal,
Like world champs. Like, what has? I can't read it. Yeah, what has Suntopia been like deemed world champs in? Or like, what is your strength?
this will give the light to it. Could be, you know, ideas.
Oh, I didn't like
A light bulb.
different things like that.
Incandescent light bulb that we using.
What did you say?
Lots of different types so that we can test them.
I'm all for the, yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna have you two.
Oh, wait, guys,
That should be number one.
Wait, give everybody, wait till everyone's done. I'm helping you guys prototype, I decided. Sorry. Wait, come on, I want to say it's an observation that I have like just
I'll do it. They're almost all
Hang on, like, that-
Not actually trying to encourage them.
Just like your favorite. Like just like
I can take it from
When you
That's just a workout we're taking.
No, like, this might be like a good, like not having a start up too.
Well, I've officially agreed.
It might like work in a different way.
Most eloquent.
We'll see.
By the seventh article.
A good one.
No, it's just that you'll be sad for the person because let's just find out. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
everybody is.
So is everyone done with their nation?
Yeah, okay, we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys are not, are you guys done with your minutes?
Hey, that's not correct.
So we can at least affirm that this is pretty fun.
Okay, now, oh, they're not done yet, I guess we have to wait for everyone.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I need 2 groups to share one of these, and then 2 groups to share one of these. And you can just open up the scenario.
Oh, pro, yeah.
Okay, this is.
And what
So
happens?
R4,
Yeah.
in your R4?
So your nation is good,
So
and
you're
then
all
their
just
nation is
either an ally.
So crisis alert, your nation suffering from a cholera outbreak. And crisis alert, privatization of water.
Okay, we want to merge with
Okay.
this. So are we merging?
Privatization of water?
Yeah.
And then,
Okay, yeah.
and then you guys now are one nation.
Yeah, that's right. We got this now.
Sorry.
So.
Oh, okay, sorry. We didn't plan to have this.
Yeah,
So much better.
Gotcha.
Cracking one, but okay, so this is the third one, which is collective, and they should be representative of your
She was like tobacco.
I was
not
like,
like
it's
a
not
tobacco.
accepted one.
She said in PR, and I was so confused. I've taken up smoking this year.
Yeah,
Lately, yeah.
Wait,
Okay, we're
so
Sophie, right? Because
we're
that's
coming
what I
together
said.
to do both with those crises in mind.
Yes.
For sure, she was a utopia. Well, let's keep
Do
going.
the same thing with
Like fresh air and water has nothing with cholera, that's a.
Let's
A direct contradiction from your radio.
So what can you tell us about your nation?
Okay, this is what
We're not really good at drawing. That's a lot.
And what's that?
And then, we were concentrating
what's
on both innovation, but also personal, right?
You're a little sillier than that.
But also
Yeah.
more
We're starting with the basic
Yeah.
rights and freedoms. Okay, that's my own political theory. That's what you start with when you're nation. So like speech to health and to love are basic rights and freedoms.
We said no
But we just for some reason we're not a nation. So this is our crest and we're called so
You don't have to.
we're the best
Are
at
supposed
free,
to-
culturally sensitive.
Yeah,
and
ideal
lawful
situation.
care is what we do.
And
That was a truly collaborative invention.
This shows a lot of health priorities, right?
Yeah, so specifically, are we just vacation from them or are we changing
Just
to
saying.
new?
No, it has to be unless like they agree with you.
Okay, wait,
No, no.
Yeah.
You just lost your president.
Lost
artist.
The vice president's not Air Force One now.
Okay, so you're new.
Protector to
Yes, we are supposed to come
Yeah, I'd like it to protect your Sophia.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
And what are our
So, how they were framing
You just
it,
got taken away from me.
I mean, normally they read it in time, but you guys said this yesterday, you need to just frame it, where you give, what's happened is you suffer from those calamities. And now we have to merge as two societies, to create a new society.
Which
With
includes.
the,
Writing and writing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's freedom of expression, which
Yeah.
includes all.
We definitely need something bigger than that, but I get what you're after.
I understand.
Just making it fit.
you
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
expand the
I'm trying to
scenario
merge
so
the
they
two
don't
countries
try to
and be
combine this.
respectful of everyone.
Yeah.
Privatization of water,
Yeah.
can we say that one of the basic rights and freedoms would be something like responsible
So yeah, then just makes sense.
It's a standard use of natural resources.
Okay.
Then for our press.
Oh, and also give them dredging. Dredging.
We're the freshwater side of the
Yeah.
So I think we're actually supposed to start from the plot.
Considering the fact that you have limited resources, you know, it's like cute to have cheap renovations and turn out.
Why?
Sure.
It's
Yes, it's working. It's essential. Maybe you don't have resources for that, but would you create different grants, given the fact that like your resources?
So no private beaches
So I see, so
either.
there are really two problems here.
No, I-
So just to issue things to this.
I think.
Overtime. I'm just advocating for a
I
revolution.
think that,
Yeah.
if this is
Overthrow
about
that.
shares, there's a second one.
I am
It's about
so for that.
anything you
And one of them is
We'll just keep.
that you're introducing,
Yeah.
I think
an
that's
speech
external,
What's happening?
it's war or famine, yeah, so that was like,
This is
what
my
we did even if we didn't have to
I
merge.
think that is an individual
Right,
right.
and then we also merged, so you're introducing two big changes, do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
And
let's
I
roll
was
back
just
to
saying,
the-
it's because of them that we have to merge, the famine was a change.
Oh, no, I think we wanted to make it so that they're of necessity to work. Yeah, we want to make it so that you guys can work together. That's why we created a crisis. I know we're trying to streamline, we're trying to make that clear, but we didn't know how exactly.
Megan, do you think it'd be?
But one of the many are captured in the first two, right?
They're both the same, or just one person?
Yeah.
That's how I was thinking, and like the
Pulling up like
outline.
columns, right? We've got a really thoughtful of life there.
Mostly go somewhere that protects
And our
their
first two
own
rights are so good, we don't need
country is like.
It's totally covered.
It's safe in some way, and the idea behind this is supposed to be that
How,
like,
how,
choose
like,
different.
that's very,
like,
it's not the.
You're really united around like Sophie and them, like you're really
Saying
united
that,
around
then
you
you're-
together, like two.
Yeah.
So,
The goal was that like no, you wouldn't be just like an ambassador,
Very
you
well,
would get to
yeah.
Sophie and them to
Exactly.
help them with their like
So-
bestiality.
What this means is that clearly our crest is like
Right?
an
Like
open
you
door that
wouldn't
leads
just
to
go as a
information.
consultant, like you would go.
It's gotta be
and-
obvious, right?
I think that's, no, that's the press.
Oh, that's a metal.
oh, that's
Exactly.
what
That's the
yeah,
press.
yeah.
I don't know what it needs to be.
Shared aspect of it. I don't know, some.
Maybe they can be.
Like consideration of everyone's essentially.
That's brilliant.
I love it.
You guys are all about going and not doing it.
Someone write that down.
But then, like, what happened?
Here.
It seems like they're in
Like, I hope it was
the.
exercise, and then, but
Oh,
then they
yeah,
have like
sorry.
that piece of it.
Or this one was just like,
Go down there.
Totally not.
So what do we got then?
So our whole certified, like.
I like this, I mean, like, I should get
The thing, like.
Yeah, y'all are like-
Sort of,
Yeah.
that,
They're like having like rock.
Yeah.
Innovative, culturally sensitive environment.
Yeah.
Just come with it, come play this in
Takes the
Mexico.
stupid right. Make it metal, it's a whole new text.
And it's approximately the same for the guitar. Yeah, that's what one.
Oh, yeah, so little projects that we're on, in like really rapid draft, told me, because I was putting a paper. And the question.
Innovative culturally sensitive natural resource policy.
Oh,
that's what we're
Yeah, it was a truth, yeah.
And then it came up towards the end, how many are there?
So we could do Utopia, right?
So like, do you, can
Some
you
Utopia.
just say, I'm not
Well,
talking.
I feel like some has to be on there, because now we're a wealthy island nation.
Yeah.
So some has to be a part of that.
Yeah,
Run around, like, it isn't moving nuts, it's really fun. That's like my favorite subject.
So let's make it. I went with like something with
I thought it was like, weird, like the spring.
Yeah, maybe we just
So,
like that.
Start a new.
Oh, yeah, it's
I love it. I'm so.
Yeah, it's like.
how's you
Oh,
feel?
yes, oh, my kids.
For it to work every single time, you would have to like, do it by yourself. But, like,
Oh, start bouncing.
for like
Air bouncing.
Sundonia,
Oh, that's what it is.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's not gonna be.
Actually, I want to.
Yes, exactly.
Sort of going like this.
In a way, those bits are there
But it
for
changes the.
Well, that's my question.
game, right? Which is to imagine someone else's hardship.
I don't know.
But
I don't think it's
actually more than that. Yeah, right. So your values make your hardships. Yeah. Well, so she moved in with me.
And I was better than this would be.
She's just involved.
Okay, I'm gonna
I just heard
Because I think that you just like.
sorry,
I just heard a comment in this week so
Yeah.
make sure you specify what you're talking about. Like, what actually you're talking about? What years you're talking about?
we were meant to like initially design like this was designed for the purpose of adults. I mean, we were gonna come to the curriculum like how to trigger kids. But I actually think that, but actually, yeah, but like yeah, using like the same sort of concept, the same sort of like thinking. But I actually think this is actually.
Yeah.
Start with that.
So everyone must be wondering, like, what the hell does this have to do with empathy? And the thing is, I think I want to clarify the definition of empathy. I think it's like very rooted in our heads that has to do with caring for someone else, but essentially it's the projection of one's own personality into a personality. Oh, is that a photo?
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, it's okay. I didn't know. It's fine.
That was super weird.
No, it's okay. You can take picture.
Recorded the whole time.
You know everything. Yeah, this is a good point.
I don't remember signing a liability. Okay. Yeah, empathy is like. Sorry. Empathy is the projection of one's own personality into the personality of someone else. So, sorry. Okay. Wait, what was that?
You said it backwards.
The projection of one's own personality into the personality of another in order to better understand him or her. So, like, I guess, yeah, I'll clarify that. So for this is, I think, like a visual.
You know what? When I empathize with you, if you just
description is like putting yourself.
Oh yeah, putting yourself in the
projecting
shoes.
your personality, that's my personality.
Oh, sorry. Like being able to interpret, being able to like put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yes, absolutely. Gotcha.
But everyone obviously has. Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry.
I'm really bad at this. Okay, everyone has like a different type. Everyone like displays their empathy in different ways. Is I guess what I'm trying to say. There's no one strict way of empathizing with another. Like, oh, like your dog died. I'm so sorry. Like that's not the only way to empathize with others. It's just really being. I think hearing you guys speak, you guys took into account your culture and then the other team's culture and try to merge it and create a new one, which I think is super cool because I think essentially for cultural inclusivity and cultural diversity, at the core is just trying, being able to understand someone else's ideals and beliefs, and being able to, I guess, interpret that with the idea that you have your own cultural like ideals and beliefs. Like you don't necessarily have to impose your beliefs on others, but they can coexist. So I guess that is kind of what I wanted to say in regards to how this really relates to our topic.
And I know we were talking about kids for the most part before this. Just want to say that when we designed this yesterday, it was for the purpose of adults. This game was designed for adults. And what we were originally going to do was take this, have you guys see like the sort of thinking that we were, our sort of like direction, and then ask like how can we turn this into a game for kids. But actually seeing this makes me think that it might be a pretty solid game for adults too. So like, what are your guys' thoughts or opinions?
We were talking about the age group, right? I mean, I could imagine as young as middle schoolers even doing something like what we just did. I don't know. whatsoever, right? So I don't have any notion of like how socially or intellectually like grade school age kids would interact with what we just did though. But that could probably be interesting with some research too, right?
But definitely high school age, as young as high school age could do this. And yeah, for a bunch of adults, it's a fun little exercise. So I can see you using it in some settings all the way up.
Can I follow up on this, because it gets, your question about what age group is an avenue into asking what's the context in which these people are doing these to begin with. So if you're saying, would adults be interested in this as a game you play with your neighbors? That's why the answer is no. Okay.
Come on, play world.
So what's the context in which you imagine any of your sort of games or exercises? Is it sort of where a teacher, for instance, has the goal of building empathy, so he or she is going to use some of your exercises and explain it that way, as opposed to, hey kids, the best new fun game came in, and the kids intrinsically finding it preferable to their games?
I think that, I mean, originally with the resource that we were designing, it was more for teachers to sort of design a lesson plan, so the kids wouldn't really know what they were doing, what they were learning. It would just be like, sort of just be like, hey, here's this activity. We're going to do this activity for class today, and then we're going to discuss it or see how it goes.
So then when you ask about what works for adults, then I need to know, why are the adults doing it? Maybe it's a church group or something.
Right.
I'm making this up, but
This is like the first time this is the first time I personally have thought of designing a game for adults, like through the semester. So right off the bat, I'm not entirely sure. But,
Can I offer some advice? Because I do a lot of team building and group formation stuff, and I'm not sure it's perfect yet, but there are a lot of things like this that adults and other people in those contexts use. So I could see this with some refinement and some other being maybe part of a train-the-trainer exercise. It could be a tool for teachers to use to become, you could use it in a lot of different contexts within both the classroom setting and other settings. Need to think about it a little bit more, but I can see contexts in which it would be used.
So for me personally, I was seeing this in a classroom setting because I think my personal goal is that institutions would be more inclined to implement socio-emotional learning rather than, kind of driving kids to be good at math, learn the Pythagorean theorem. Here's English thrown at you, write an essay. So in terms, besides that, I think empathy building should be implemented or integrated into any educator's curriculum, because I just think those skills are so valuable as you go on even to college and even to the real world, because you're not always going to be around a group of people who agree with you, and I think it's just a very marketable skill to be able to communicate with others who are different.
Are you sure it's not? I don't know why I'm fairly certain of this, but I'm fairly certain that kindergarten classes, first grade classes, they do have as part of their curricula stuff like social interactions, and don't bite Johnny. But other stuff about diversity. One of the things and I wonder if you've looked into this, is at what point that sort of stuff tends to drop out of schools' curricula.
Right.
Right? And then suddenly there's a niche.
So
that you guys can say oh, X happens in somebody's state's curricula. This is a thing you can do easily. You fold it in class time. I don't know. It's food for thought. I think we're in a position to drop it.
Sorry.
I think, well, I was just going to say, naturally, once kids transition from not being in a home classroom to being in, so basically from elementary to middle, so in elementary school when one teacher is responsible for the entire emotional and educational development of a kid, there's so when you look up empathy games for kids, there tend to be a lot more for younger people, and then the older ones tend to be a lot more of thought experiments and things like that are most likely probably not a classroom math teacher for sixth grade might not pick up that and be this is what we're doing today, good thing all those standardized tests are coming up. So that, just to comment on that, I think that would be a really good, we were talking about this being maybe appropriate for middle schoolers, that could be a really cool, I think it would just be a matter of which class it gets taught in, because they don't teach a class called How to Be Human
Yeah.
Though I'm advocating for someone to teach that.
Sure.
I know that in early childhood education, there's a big emphasis on identification of emotions and feelings in yourself and in others, as a part of, to navigate through problems and just to kind of become more self-aware. But I think that sort of does drop off at a pretty early point and isn't really revisited and sometimes isn't even construed as something important in the later years. Do you think that have you thought about that in developing any of these games for the sort of older elementary school ages? Even in the one that's up there right now, I've noticed that there's a focus on action in a lot of your games. What would you do? What should you do unto others? But have you thought about incorporating a way for the students who are doing these games to identify how they are feeling in the situation that you're putting forward and how others are feeling in that? And
We got the others part with the how might they feel. So this is the same thing we have, like the compliment where you have how might they feel, but I think how are you feeling is actually a pretty solid third part to that game for that activity. If we were to pursue that.
Sorry.
So, no, that's okay. So, one thing, the blue white brown eye experiment's a great argument for having IRBs. So in the Love and Chew one, the question that you were asking the kids changed over time, or at least that was my sense, having worked with a group, right? And initially, and I thought actually also the experiment that it was somewhat based on, the questions were more on why do you think you were selected, and then you ended up asking more like what's good or bad with your group. I'm just wondering how you decided on those questions, and if you didn't already talk about how that experiment worked with the kids themselves, I'd be interested in hearing that. If you already talked about that, I'll catch up with everyone else, don't worry about it.
Right, so the questions were a huge deal just because we didn't want to incite any type of violence among the two groups. I think the first question we asked in your class was like, or one of the last questions we asked was like, what was it like?
Like the really intense one?
The really intense one where they're like freaked out.
Yeah, it's like, so the questions, I can read you the questions, I have them right here. So by a show of hands, how many of you like the gloves teams more? And when that happened, 2 out of 3 times, everyone on the gloves team raised their hand and nobody on the shoes team, and then we asked the same question, vice versa. And then you say, why did you like that team more? And then an individual student will answer, why do you think you were assigned to your group? And then the answer is like random. Does anyone want to guess what we were trying to teach you? And then we get really intense, as in real life, have any of you felt like another group of people, whether that is just another group of people at your school or in a neighborhood or just in general, is worse than your own group? Have you ever disliked a group for no real reason? And then that just sort of like...
And were you able to try this with the actual kids, or because of the problems that they...
Yeah, just because it like spoke volumes that in your class alone, when you like presented that question, everyone was like, whoa, like what the heck? So we thought that if we actually said this in front of kids, they'd be even more flustered.
Well, that last one, I'm even thinking the others.
Yeah, the last one especially.
Because one thing that struck me about it, actually, when you were planning it, so getting into the heads of like how kids process information at different ages changes, right? And how much they can abstract from their own experience and all that. I'm just wondering how much you sort of work that into thinking of the games and figuring out, would you do it differently with a 2nd grade class than a 4th grade class, say?
So I guess I think one of the things we dealt with was just differences in, we couldn't come up with a way to standardize we didn't know what 3rd graders were capable of thinking, because that differs in this, like in DC, and that differs in California. Like it just differs by like the state of like your background, or like what kind of neighborhood you're in. If you're in a more, I guess.
Right, sure. But got it.
Yeah, so that kind of.
There are some things that kind of differ.
Yeah, so we could, like, for example, reading. Like, not all 3rd graders can read. I think, Marisha, you said a statistic where, like,
Yeah, there's some terrible statistic in DC that's like 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 kids in DC public schools in the 3rd grade cannot read at a 3rd grade level. So like we talked a lot about creating games if they were age differentiated that were totally exclusive of even like needing to be able to read. So something that was more conversation based or something that was more like physical movement based.
Yeah, which is why we came up with these different sections instead of segmenting it by like 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. The standards are kind of different in every district, so we did it from reading, non-reading, and so then
What's the handshake game?
sorry, what was that?
The handshake game?
The handshake game. Oh. So this one's kind of a more creative kind of game, and it's probably for the younger crowd where students just pair up and they create their own secret handshake, and then you have to switch partners and teach your handshake to another person, and then like you can possibly like integrate like a reward based thing where the most creative handshake that includes like singing and blah 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 like wins or something like that. I don't know.
So can I ask you another broad question? One other broad question. So and this it's more about how to think through the project, not a change in the project. So what if there are positives from having in-group thinking, they help groups cohere, they enable values to remain in place, there can actually be differences that are less invidious than the ones that than the classic ones about disliking people because of race. Are there ways to, does that have any validity? And if so,
Yeah.
Does that change your thinking about the game at all? Are there ways to get, especially if you're starting to do it with older folks, to deal with the positives and negatives of in-group thinking?
Well, there was an article I read, it was about businesses of when to be empathetic and when to use your head, as in like there's a difference. And they did this one study where someone either had to take a perspective, as in like use their head, or they had to empathize with the person, and then they asked like a certain questions, and then for that study in particular, the empathetic people answered more questions right than the perspective-taking people, and then another study they did it like a different way, and then perspective people answered more questions right than the empathetic people. So there's definitely there definitely is validity that in-group thinking and not being empathetic actually helps in some situations. But I think I'm not entirely sure how we would integrate that into a
I don't know either. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
wanted
I
to
think the
raise it.
purpose
Some
of
of
our
these
project-
oppositions, like mercy and justice, goes back to the beginnings of religion, how to do both or however. But it's not a new problem.
I think also just for like smaller people, younger people, kind of humans, in-group thinking can be valuable, right? Like I don't think anyone's disputing that, but I also think that a lot of times it goes hand in hand with like an out-group bias, and so I think
absolutely.
that the like gloves and shoes activity, in order like. There's nothing wrong with being like super proud that you're wearing plastic gloves on your feet, but that doesn't give you the right to think that people who wear shoes on their hands are terrible.
Absolutely.
So I think like I see what you're saying, and I think that there could like nuance could be added into that game that addresses that, while also like tackling the issue of like you don't just get to think other people suck. So
Right.
I don't know. I mean I see what you're saying.
That goes to actually. Go ahead, Roshan, sorry.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wasn't out for that long either. It's just been a long week. Okay. It's the last grade.
I know,
What was interesting I thought about this, and like especially how we were talking about it yesterday, is that like using the groupthink as a tool against people.
Mm-hmm.
Not like against them to do them harm, but like using it as a tool, manipulating it to make them experience different things. Like this, if you develop it if you could develop like a group thing around your nation, and then give that nation, a disaster, make them part of someone else. Like I don't know how will that work here, but some of the other ones we talked about too, like the other options, more effectively use that to then, or like to where if one group gives the other group the disaster, it gets to pick it for the other person, or does the same thing with Foursquare with the shoes and gloves things, that like where whatever you say is bad about the other group, your neighbor group, then you have to like become mayor of that nation, right? Like you develop new thing and then you switch it up and like change the conditions without telling them. Like I think there's potential there, and that's especially for the adult version of this, if there's one.
There were two sort of things that came up just in terms of the mechanics of the games that are just worth mentioning at this point. I think number one is the thing that I have the hardest time getting my head around exactly is the discussion question at the end of Socks and Gloves. I'm not, and there's a question
Shoes and
about
gloves.
it as
Shoes and gloves.
Shoes and gloves.
Good work with
Socks and gloves and shoes.
Shoes, bare feet.
Is like the discussion question as a tactic, right? Is that the right move to make in general? And then if you decide that it is, like how to phrase it, what it is, and so on. And I don't even know that I have anything to suggest there. I think that needs some thought, careful thought. The second part maybe picks up sort of on what Arjun was saying. It's not even an elaboration on it, but when we were playing and we put it together, in a weird way, the disaster just sort of disappeared, and it became an exercise in merging values, right? Not having one set of values overwrite the other,
Right.
but in fact making a hybrid set of values. So I don't know, I'm not saying take the disaster out, but there's something to think about there, the relationship.
Do you find value in just having the merging of
That's
both
kind of
those?
what I'm suggesting, yeah.
But you could also do the disaster scenario, just thinking aloud actually based on that. So if you did the disaster scenarios independently, shook up each, and then said, now have them work together, actually give the two the same disaster, and then have them work together after they've tried the disaster separately, and is there a way to join their values to deal with the disaster? That would be an interesting way to do it potentially.
So to jump on this point, I really liked that it was merging values and that the disaster bit dropped out, right? So there's this external force, the focus seems to shift from like, oh, how do we understand what these other people care about and how do we accommodate that? It becomes like negotiation. So how do I maximize what I want out of this? How do I get that from this? And that's a very different kind of interaction. And I think that there are like other versions of the game maybe that can be scaled down for children. So like talking about nation states and like rights, it's harder for young kids. We can talk about like, we're going on a camping trip, right? We can bring these two things. Our tent can look like this. These are the 3 activities we're gonna do. And then it's like, oh no, we have to join teams now. We have to join, it's one camping trip. So now we have to decide what to do. How do we think about what other people want? So there may be less antagonistic ways to do that. And that sort of like pushes away from the negotiation mindset.
And actually, one thing I like about that gets with the narrative one, which actually looks like, this is not a criticism, I mean, these are kinds of things that have been used in schools since before I was in elementary school. But there's the problem of how people say they'll behave, right, and how they actually do. And the more specifically you're working out an actual problem, the less that happens because it's more like working it out in reality than in the abstract. The other small thing I was going to say was when we first heard about the gloves and shoes one, and you didn't get to see, but like with a bunch of 6-year-olds, the logistics of taking off gloves and shoes and keeping their focus, and then they'll actually do that. I mean, I couldn't believe it was actually going to work remotely like what you actually were hoping for, just because of the way little kids work and the way that kind of activity gets them going. So that's something to think about, again, with the age stuff. It has to be, they're kids, they don't act like, like a model of a kid. So anyway.
Like putting stuff on weird stuff, taking your shoes off during somewhere, putting weird stuff on your gloves on your feet sounds like it's probably easier to get kids to do that.
Well, to do it, but
then
their focus in a
6-year-olds
funny
with
way.
shoes on their hands sounds dangerous.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. That sounds
Well, there's that too.
Can I just, I think we're wrapping up. If I could just make a final comment. And you've gotten some great feedback, and this was excellent. And we have now watched all of the crits, and I just have to say, and we started talking about some of the roller coaster that your group has gone through, and the ups and downs, and you're down to 2 people plus 1, and all that stuff. This is excellent. This is excellent.
Thank
You have been able to produce items. You've been able to test items. You've been able to go through that iteration process. You've been able to, and I think if you want to continue with this, there are opportunities to continue with this and to learn more about grade levels so that you can level these up and down, and where educational development, there are all sorts of opportunities for you to take this if you want to. But given everything that you've gone through, I think this group you've done an excellent job and should be very pleased with where you've ended up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job.